Are you looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select two or more players, pick more or less on their projections for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the PrizePicks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, PrizePicks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/bluewire and use code BLUEWIRE. That's code BLUEWIRE at prizepicks.com/bluewire for a first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Welcome to, what is this? Pod Mavericks presents After Dark. Kirk Henderson and Josh Bowe joining you after a week apart, recording here tonight on April 25th. It's a Tuesday night. The Atlanta Hawks just held off elimination, defeating the Boston Celtics in a pretty wild game. I'm Kirk Henderson, editor-in-chief of MavsMoneyball.com, and I'm joined by the man Josh Bowe, my co-editor over there. What's going on, Josh?
Oh, nothing much. Just continuing to march through this weird time that we did not expect to have off. Joining some NBA playoffs. You know, it's kind of same old. Nothing crazy going on. But it's good that we get to check in and chat because there's always something to talk about.
There's always something. You know, we were both of us were like co-irritated today, and I would say like Josh and I share like part of why I think our show works and our website works is there's a lot of different opinions and a lot of different thoughts. But one of the things that our website is kind of like locked in unison about is just this very bizarre notion that the Dallas Mavericks could have made the play-in. It's something like. I want to say it was Landon over at Mavs Fans for Life tweeted something to the effect last night of like, this is why you try to make the play-in, talking about how the Lakers and then it was earlier in the night, the Heat which were an 8 seed entering the playoffs. They went up 3-1 over the Milwaukee Bucks, and that just started a general discourse over, well, this is why you try. And it's like, I'm trying to understand the point of view because I get not quitting. Like Luka didn't want to quit. Kyrie didn't want to quit. But the Mavericks lost so many freaking basketball games. They were terrible. And it's like, well, what if the team that couldn't win 2 games in a row could all of a sudden go on a 6-game hot streak?
That also wouldn't have mattered because the Thunder won the game on Sunday.
No, that's the other part. It's
I don't understand.
It's all this. It's this bizarre retcon from people that I really like. Which it's just like, I'm sorry, the Mavericks couldn't. You know, not only would they have not made it as a 10 seed, like just all this, like it's a cacophony of like multiple bad things happening, and it's going to keep haunting us right up until the Dallas Mavericks lose their pick in the lottery.
Yeah,
in a couple of weeks.
I do not want to hear it after that. But yeah, it's like comparing the Miami Heat and the Lakers to the Mavericks, like. Those teams were they were the 7th seed. Like the Heat fell down to 8 in the play-in, but like you cannot compare those 2 teams to the Mavericks. Those 2 teams were above 500, like 7th seed. If this was before the play-in, they would have made the play. The Mavericks were 10 seed, 6 games under 500. They're not the same. Not the same. So it was just like, I get it. I think it's just, you know, national guys aren't obviously as plugged into the team as we are, and this isn't like a disrespect or trying to say they don't watch the games. I mean, those guys do a lot of work and watch the games. It's just, I think it's just a reaction to like, wow, this Maverick season really sucked. What's going on? And trying to make hay of it, and this has kind of been the reaction. That's the only thing I can think of because the logic has just flown out the window, and it's been people just making up these narratives that don't exist, and like, you know. Like it's over. Like if we were talking about this before the season ended, there's still be a discussion about it, but like it's over. The Mavericks made the right decision.
Yeah.
The thing that would have happened. Like we don't have to go back and what if this, because the Mavericks made the right call. As much as it sucked and as much as it's like a reflection of how embarrassing the season is, that's where I figured this is where all the critique would come from. But instead it's like this weird, like, oh, well, they still had a chance. And it's like, no, they gave up that chance like 2 weeks before when they lost 2 straight games of the Hornets. And they lost 3 straight to Atlanta and Miami and whatever the Sixers. Like, like that's when it was over. So they actually tried longer than I think most other teams would.
Yeah. I mean, and
other teams would have thrown in the towel earlier.
And in hindsight, it really looks like the Mavericks were trying to ride it out in an organic way. Part of why the tanking against Chicago and San Antonio was like so offensive to people was they had beat the Kings the night before or a game before.
Yeah.
And I don't think we thought they were going to win. The Kings were on the second night of a back-to-back, but it was like it was a made 3 from the Mavericks losing the game, more or less. The Kings just couldn't hit shots. But, we're here now, and that's sort of, the way things have gone. We've not talked a ton about the playoff basketball, and I will say that there are some things that have sort of stood out to me. And, beyond the fact that with this new collective bargaining agreement, the Maverick Adam Silver is going to get his midseason tournament, which is going to be a little bit peculiar, but it's been very apparent to me in these playoff series, at least the ones that are a little bit more evenly matched, that it just feels more and more like the regular season does not matter. So you look at what the Lakers have done, and obviously the Lakers started off the season really bad. They had lots of injuries, and then they remade their team.
Yeah, they have a completely new team.
But they remade their team, and Rui Hachimura, who was the earliest acquisition for them and their whirlwind of trade stuff, also wasn't part of their revitalization down the stretch. And he has been the man for them against Memphis, playing probably the best basketball of his career. And I don't know what to make of it. I feel like he's a little bit of a microcosm for kind of the issues at large with, you try to take these things in and you look at the season as a whole as a guide, because you figure with enough games, there's some sort of sample, but there's just, I got nothing. Like this is too weird. Like I understand that the Grizzlies are missing Steven Adams, who is kind of their soul to an extent, but to go down 3-1 to this Lakers team and to get your ass whooped by Rui Hachimura while Jared Vanderbilt, who was key in crushing Dallas, has not mattered. I don't know what to make of this. And granted, it's just one series, but I'm just wondering if you have any sort of thoughts on it.
Well, I think one, it's, the sins of Memphis kind of just coming to bear, even with the injuries. Like they're a horrible half-court team, even when they were full strength. So I think every plugged in Memphis blogger, reporter, media person has kind of probably been like, hey, this could happen because, regular season ball just doesn't the way they play in the regular season just doesn't translate in the playoffs, because you have to be able to score in the half court because the game slows down and all that stuff. So that was always going to happen regardless of the injuries. Maybe it would have happened a round later, instead of maybe the first round. And then the other thing is, I think we're learning, feel like we're slowly transitioning. Like 4 or 5, 6 years ago, it was like, okay, you can't have the Tony Allen type anymore who just can't shoot or do anything offensively. Now you need like 3-and-D, and the league went hard on these 3-and-D guys that can make spot up shots and play defense, that can stay on the floor. Now I feel like we're going like a step past that, and it's like, okay, you can't just shoot 3. Like you have to be able to attack a closeout because the defense is adjusted again, and now they're taking away your threes. So if you can't dribble or if you can't do something with the ball, not saying you have to be a point guard, but if you just can't do the basic line drive, attack a closeout, now you're less valuable because defenses just keep adapting and adjusting. So, Rui Hachimura, say what you will about him. I mean, he can do that. He can be your 5th guy that can attack a closeout or make a corner 3. And, Jared Vanderbilt is a little more offensive limited, I would say. So maybe that's why, that's what's happening here. But I've just noticed in these playoffs, we just keep seeing these teams that are struggling, and it's like that 5th guy. There's just nowhere to hide anymore. Teams are too good at scouting. Teams are too good at defense. There's too much data, too much knowledge, too much smart people in the league compared to like 5, 10, 20 years ago compared to where we are now. Like, it's just hard to hide guys on the floor like it used to be, I think, like even 5 or 10 years ago. I think that's what we're seeing. Like, look at Cleveland. Like, they've got 4 of maybe the 5 or 6 best players in that series. But because they don't have that 5th guy, they're struggling big time.
I want to circle back to that series in a second, but the chat is making note of the fact, and this is important. Brandon Clark missing from the Grizzlies. That's another key thing, huge. And that it just goes to show you how team construction, you've got to have real depth. And the Grizzlies are obviously not aided by the fact that Dylan Brooks is just the embodiment of I feel like it went from being fun to root against him in like a couple of days to he's sad. Like his quotes paired with the fact that he's skipping the media, like Memphis may never recover from this. Like, this is like a dynasty shattering before it even assembles with just pure like hubris. Like it's sort of sad. Ja Morant earlier when he hurt his hand, he like compared his off-court incidents with his injuries. And it's like, have some self-awareness, guys. So it's like, they're kind of the perfect situation to a perfect storm of sadness. Very, it's not similar to the Mavericks in 2007 when they lost, but just like the sense of like foreboding surrounding them now is, I'm glad I don't root for that team because they're in a really, they're just, it's in a rough spot. But, circling to that other series, it's funny because this Knicks, I want to say that the offenses in these 2 series between the Knicks and the Cavs might be the worst 2 offenses by offensive rating in the playoffs so far.
Yeah, I think I heard on the Low podcast that if these ratings were in the regular season, they'd both be like they'd be 30 and 29.
Right, and I'm like
below the Hornets.
So I'm struggling to reconcile like our guy Jalen Brunson, who we miss, absolutely tearing it up while having the ball longer, more per possession, and more dribbling than Luka did in last year's playoffs, while also winning. It's a weird. So I mean, the Knicks could advance. I mean, they're probably gonna based off of where they are, and then just get utterly rocked in the next round. Like, is that like the most obvious thing that's gonna happen? Like, it's such a bizarre playoffs. Like, I always try to, like, when I'm watching these games, thinking, okay, how can the Dallas Mavericks, what do they need? What are we learning from these playoffs? And to date, I just don't have anything. I keep circling back to, well, if the Mavericks had better guys, they would suck less. I mean, the Cleveland thing is just huge because if they had like Dorian Finney-Smith, who is pretty awful as their 5th starter, like Dorian is basically in that Brooklyn series, he his whole career loved Dorian, but he owes a lot to Luka, plain and simple. But if he was on that Cavs team as their 5th starter in the small forward spot, which essentially gave them nothing, maybe the Cavs would win more games. Maybe they would, maybe be a tie series. I mean, it's just.
Or what if they did that Karis LeVert, Tim Hardaway Jr. Swap that was rumored at the trade deadline? I think, as whatever we feel about Timmy, I think he'd be giving them a little bit more than LeVert is giving them. So that would be kind of interesting too. I guess in terms of like what I'm like taking, like, because we always try to look at the playoffs because there's always trends, and then that factors into your roster building. I think the thing I'm noticing, the 2 things is, one we already knew is like threes matter. Threes wipe away so much. Like I don't know if you've seen any tweets about or seen some stuff about the Heat series.
I was going to ask you you did this morning. This was amazing. Please go with it.
So Cooper Moorhead, who's been a long time Heat media guy, kind of did a little thread looking at the Heat's 3-point shooting, and it's just like it's astronomical compared to where they were in the regular season. Like the Heat are the 7th team in postseason history to shoot 40+% from 3 on at least 25 attempts in 4 consecutive games. And again, they were the 27th best 3-point shooting team in the regular season. They're up 3-1 against the Bucks, and just kind of riffing off that, it's like, how many times have we seen the Mavericks either be in games or just win games that they flat out did not deserve to win because they made 18 threes and their opponent made 10, or they made 17 threes and their opponent made 7. And it's like when we've learned, your guy Seth Partnow at The Athletic and some other smart data people have basically said, 3-point percentage is so variable. Like in terms of defense, like, yeah, you can contest and you can do all these things, but in terms of that percentage, that number of makes, that's like variance that can be unaffected by defense or whatever you're doing, because guys can miss open shots and guys can make contested shots. So it's tough to gauge how much of a defensive impact you're making on 3-point percentage. So, just kind of riffing off that, like, I'm just imagining, imagine the Mavericks if they somehow made the playoffs, like if they just had a couple of these games where they make 18 to 23s and the other team just misses through no fault of their own, not necessarily because the Mavericks are playing good defense, and they can turn a series around. And I think that's why it was so hard for me to want to give up on them this season, because they had that advantage. So it's a little frustrating because it's like, wow, they just need like a couple more pieces, and this offense is so good that it'll take care of themselves. And then it's also like, you want to be a little optimistic. You're like, wow, okay, so they only do need a couple more pieces because this offense is just so good. So it's like looking through glass half empty, glass half full. Like, it's frustrating that they've wasted this offense for a couple of seasons with some mediocre defenses, aside from last season. And what do you know? Last season was the season they had the good defense and they make the run. So, it's just like, get more players and they could have made a run. And they don't need that many more. They just need a couple more.
You referred to it this morning as Dallas does the neat party trick of hitting all the threes, because and forgive me, I was listening but also looking stuff up. Did you talk about the Heat's run compared to the Heat's regular season shooting?
Yeah, they're 40+% in 4 consecutive games. They were 27th in the regular season.
So like
in 3-point percentage.
The likelihood, I've not looked at it, but the likelihood that they did this, shot 40% from 3 is low, because they just weren't good at shooting the 3 ball, despite having some pretty interesting 3-point shooters. Yeah, that would be kind of it for me too. And I mean, when you watch these games from a big picture, this is where like I understand the notion behind what Landon tweeted. And what a lot of people, like some of my friends, are killing me for. It's like, well, the Mavericks should have tried because they could have got there. Things could have happened and gone their way.
They tried and failed.
Right. And I get it. But that's why I get it, because the party trick is real. Like, it's a thing they can do. And so it's very peculiar. Yeah. I'm going to keep watching. Obviously, I'm looking. Like, the next round is where things start to get a little bit more tactical, where you start figuring out how, certain teams can win or really can't win in a lot of respects. So that's going to be something. There's not really much else in the way of Mavericks news, even from last week, which is fine. Kevin Sheridan of Dallas Maverick, isn't that his name? Sheraton of Dallas Morning News. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep. Longtime columnist.
He wrote a column simply excoriating the front office for the hire of Dennis Lindsey, not because of Lindsey, but because of what Lindsey represents, which was, he essentially said, like, we've heard for years about how Mike Finley's the wonderkin and how, we're going to get Nico Harrison. He's going to come in and do X and Y and Z things. Well, if that's the case, then why are you bringing in Lindsey as a special advisor? Which I thought was, I don't know. I'm in this odd headspace, and I was telling some group of friends this today. Like, I'm using like I'm a high school girl in a speech class. I apologize. It's a verbal tick. I'm working on it. Jeremy Senna also wants to know the racism. Yes. Well, look, anything that can't be verified and is not something I really feel all that comfortable talking on. With what Lindsey may or may not have done. It simply becomes one of these things where what I was talking to a group of friends with earlier today is, when you look at the big picture of what's going on in Dallas, seeing everyone sort of slowly come around to our longtime stance about the problems and what they represent has been very, very gratifying. Is not the right word, because you don't want to be right, but it's been just very odd to hear the Heat turned up like this. And you mentioned this a couple shows ago, that the Mavericks as an organization has probably never felt this kind of heat. The closest might have been after they lost in the finals in 2006, and then they got rid of Avery after 2007. So it's, that's the closest, but the media environment wasn't the same. So it's just, I don't know. That's kind of been the max of the news stuff related that I've been thinking about. Have you seen anything else?
No, not really anything else. But yeah, I think Jeremy does make a good point, that I made. It was like, whether we verify it or not, like, it's not that hard to find smart basketball people that don't have those accusations. So there's that. And then, speaking of Kevin's column, it is kind of weird. His point is valid, but also I don't know if you've seen or heard, but like, apparently the Mavericks front office is like small compared to other teams. Like, they just don't have a lot of people. So yeah, well, yes, they did sell us a bill of goods with Finley and Harrison and Cuban. It sounds like, though, it's them and then like a cap guy, and it's like, you need more. Like, you need more voices.
They could be wonderful. They could be wonderful for all we know. They don't get a chance to work.
Yeah, that's
been the real, like, everything. And I experienced this in my job, and I'm sure lots of people do. Managers often expect results immediately. And unfortunately, in almost all business processes, it's trusting the process over time to execute the results and not constantly switching things up. Unfortunately, we have a superstar, speeds up your timeline. Lots of this stuff is difficult, but it's really, if this all goes sideways, there's going to be one person that takes all the blame, and he's Mark Cuban.
Right.
So, all right. So we're going to take I'm going to do this for myself for the audio. We're going to insert some ads here. Do me a favor, guys, all of y'all. If you're listening to the ads in the podcast, that stuff helps Josh and I, just to be quite candid. So if you could do that in the show, I would be grateful. Josh would be grateful. And then we're going to talk next about some player reviews for the season.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. One of the things I love about Indeed is it makes hiring all in one place so easy and streamlined so I can spend more time on the rest of my business. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Okay, so one of the things we're going to do the next several weeks is, in Mavs Moneyball, we're constantly churning out stuff. We have a big staff. We have lots of guys that like to write things. We've been putting out 3 to 4 articles a day still, which is cracking me up because I didn't think we would have anything to write about. And now we have started to have our kind of deluge of what we refer to, as our player review series, where we're looking at each and every guy in the roster and what they had to offer this year. We're starting with some kind of low-hanging fruit. In particular, there's one guy that ended the roster on the season, started the year with the Summer League team in AJ Lawson. And I don't have a ton to comment on about him other than I very much hope that he plays with the Summer League team again and that he gets a couple of opportunities early in the year, because I thought he brought the right kind of energy, size. He looked a lot bigger by the end of the season, like he had been spending some time in the weight room. I enjoyed the brief glimpses of AJ Lawson's game. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, we didn't see much. But when he did get on the floor, it seemed like he did stuff, even if it was garbage time or, these last 2 games, which were, the Mavericks weren't trying to win and neither were the other teams. Well, the players were, but you know what I mean?
Right.
Everyone was sitting, so it's hard to judge too much in the last 2 games of the season. But yeah, he fits the profile of what they need. I mean, they just need athleticism. They just need dudes that can run and jump and get out in the open floor. Even if they're going to be a slow team with Luka, like they can still do some things in the half court with guys that can just be athletic. And, you're right. He did look much bigger than he did in summer league.
He was skinny. Yeah, he was 6'5" and 160 on the weight sheet in Vegas. He might have been more than that at that point, but that's what he had in there.
Well, he definitely looks bigger than that now.
Yeah.
So that's good. It was a little bit of a bummer. He didn't get more time because I think right when a lot of injuries hit with Luka and Kyrie, he got into a game and I think he hurt his knee, like sprained his knee or something. And he might have gotten some minutes if that didn't happen, I think. But by the time he came back, Luka and Kyrie were back and they kind of had their full rotation back. So yeah, there's not much more to say other than like these are the type of dart throws I like. This archetype of player. It's a little harder when you dart throw on like guys that don't have a good athletic profile, whether they're too small or what have you. Like, if you're gonna spend your two-way contract on someone and those guys those are dart throws, you can't rely on those guys being regular contributors. At least do it on a guy that's like, hey, we need this type of player, so let's spend one of these slots on him. So I like it from that standpoint. So yeah, I'd want to see him back.
Yep.
In that spot.
Then the next guy, just kind of working our way through, we're going to discuss 4 total people. All of them will probably be relatively short with the exception of the last guy. The next one is Theo Pinson. Theo Pinson was signed, and I still remember Tim McMahon's quote about how the Mavericks, not quote, his tweets, which was basically echoing a Mavericks source saying that the Mavericks felt that the 27-year-old forward still had some potential as to like developmental potential. I don't know. And, last MVP, basically January 1st, 2022 on, he was a pretty important guy to the Mavericks in terms of a glue guy. Him along with Jalen Brunson, things really mattered a lot. He helped in the playoffs. He was, he kind of, him alone he resulted in new basically playoff rules and like what you couldn't wear in relation to certain, like it was some wild stuff caused by Theo Pinson. And the Mavs brought him back, and it was like a sequel that didn't need to happen, is what I'll say. And look, I don't actually have anything against Theo, the person. I have something against Theo, the idea, and what he represented to the Mavericks. So please, let's not confuse this. But by the end of the year, I was so exhausted by the shtick. And, we have our own deal. We're Mavs podcasters. We do, we self-promote. You don't. I'm pretty shameless though, relative. But Theo's whole deal was promoting himself. And that frustrated me as the season was coming undone, seeing Theo Pinson podcasts and stuff like that, where he gets a triple-double in the very last game of the year where the Mavericks get blown out by the Spurs. He hops on his own podcast to talk about his own triple-double. Really respect the self-perpetuating news cycle, but dude, I don't care. Nor should any Mavericks fan. In fact, we should all be embarrassed.
Yeah, that part sucked. 2 things. One, you're like, I'm not against Pinson, the person necessarily, just against the roster spot decision. I will say, like, your 15th guy on the roster, I think he had 2 technicals from the bench this year. One got rescinded. Like, come on, man. Like, I have a problem with that. Like, because you're legitimately affecting the game in a negative way, and you're not even on the damn floor. So that sucked. Like, I think that got a little out of whack there this season. When you're the vibes guy and the vibes were very bad, like, how much do you need a vibes guy if your vibes aren't even that good? So that sucked. And then also, we learn every year, yes, the 15th guy on your roster isn't going to make or break your season, but there are going to be stretches every season where everyone's going to have to play because injuries are a thing. And it just kind of was unfortunate that, like, when the Mavericks had their injury spell, which every team goes through just about, unless you get really, really lucky, throwing him on the floor, like, not expecting him to stop the bleeding necessarily, but it was just emblematic of, like, of their problems and their thoughts to roster building. He wasn't on the roster to, like, him coming back on the team had nothing to do with, like, okay, what about the scenario if he has to play because of injuries? It was all because of he's a great locker room guy. And while we can understand that, they definitely missed JJ Barea when they decided not to bring him back as a locker room guy. There's a difference when, Barea is like at the end of his career and Pinson, like, you're using a spot on a guy that's 27. theoretically that could go to another guy that's 27 that has a bit more juice. So, it's not a big deal, but it's time to make better uses of all 15 roster spots.
Well, I just want to show the chat something, because I can't help but reshare my old jokes, and it's very niche for if you watch Succession. But I decided after the last episode that Theo is actually Cousin Greg. And if you are familiar at all with Cousin Greg, he's a try-hard weirdo. And that is Theo Pinson to me, because that was the other thing. Okay, let's just talk about his play for a second, and then we'll move on. He played like he thought he was awesome. And that, I'm not really explaining that right, but like there was a real demonstrative quality that almost felt like a wrestler at points, where if the outcome of the game didn't matter, maybe I'd feel differently. Do you know what I mean? But it's like there were instances where it's like, why is Theo doing this? You're the you're the grind guy. You're literally the 15th man.
Yeah. Why are you taking step back threes? Why are you on the floor at the end of games, initiating he was inbounding I think he was inbounding a final possession when the Mavericks were down in a game. Like it was weird. It was very weird.
Oh, poor guy. Hopefully we'll never have to speak of him again. But knowing our luck, he'll come back as the 13th man next season. Next, we have Frank Ntilikina coming back for the second year. For those of y'all who do not remember, he joined the Mavericks last year as part of a camp invite and then ended up making the team. He's a minimum guy, was not a huge investment, but we all should have been worried that the season was going to go awry when Mark Cuban and Nico Harrison made Frank Ntilikina related comments in the preseason related to the third ball handler spot. I think it was Cuban who said people forget about Frank. That became the running bit of the entire year for Mavs social media. And I want to read you something here from Ben Zadel's player review. The Mavericks Frank Ntilikina experiment did not work. That was the name of the title. Ben wrote this, quote, "At one time, I was a Ntilikina believer. Now I am an apostate. I have left the faith forever." End quote. What are your thoughts on Frank's, just entire deal?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. I think we've talked about this in Slack with Ben and other staff, who wrote this, and other staffers. Like, it's just when you've got these end of the roster spots with these minimum guys that are on non-guaranteed deals or like 1-year deals that are easily movable, whatever. Like they're dart throws, and you got to know when it's time to move on. Like you got to rotate those guys in and out every season, which is what a lot of teams do, because you just got to try to find, okay, this didn't work. Let's try to find the next diamond in the rough. Okay, this guy didn't work. Let's try another guy. Okay, this guy didn't work. We'll try another guy. These guys aren't part of your core rotation, so it's not like you're mucking up chemistry to a large degree. But Frank did all right last season, but not good enough to warrant, I think, bringing back. I think I would have rather them experimented and tried with someone else, because, again, he's not a critical part of the roster. But the fact that they brought him back and not only thought that he could potentially solve some third, it was just lunacy. And it's like, it's nothing against Frank. Like, I'm actually glad they brought him in the season that they did. Like, hey, former top 10 pick that's been released, that's got some intangibles that we might like in terms of like long defensive guard. Okay, let's try it. Okay, he played, he was not so great. Let's try something different. And instead they doubled down, and that's kind of what happens. He's just not, I don't think he's he's probably an NBA player in terms of he can probably stick around in the league, but he's definitely not a guy you want on your team multiple seasons and needing to play real minutes. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I appreciated his confidence, because, he was the guy that was drafted right before Dennis Smith, right?
Yep.
In the draft in 2017. He never really found much of a shot. He did have a lot of confidence. In the year prior in the playoffs against Devin Booker, I thought he did really well defensively. He was not a bad defender. It's just the Mavericks can't have he was really like, he had a lot of confidence shooting the ball and wasn't very good at it. Like in one, so it's just, it was a rough deal for him. And I've talked about this theory before, but I might as well talk about it again. So if you assume 15 guys on every NBA roster times 30 teams, 450 players, there's roughly 75 to 100 guys, the back, 15 to 20% of the league, that could be interchanged with guys that are overseas. They're that are playing internationally, that have chosen to step away for one reason or another. The NBA does boast the best basketball players in the world, but when you get to the back half of rosters, guys want to play. So they don't necessarily want to go play in the NBA for the final shot and just sit on somebody's bench. They want to go play basketball and make money.
Yeah.
So if the Mavericks are going to treat the back half of the roster in a certain way where they don't really pay attention to the final 5 spots, then they have to be willing to do more to bring guys in. And dart throws don't always work. So sometimes we're inadvertently harder on them than we should be, because it is a back 5. Mm-hmm. But in 2016-17, they did some dart throws with Dorian Finney-Smith, with Maxi Kleber. It can work. You just need to do the work, which circles back to what you had mentioned earlier in relation to that Kevin Sheridan post, where it doesn't seem like the Mavs do their homework. And they just kind of, they throw shit together. And that's been, Frank was kind of a byproduct of that.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, he showed some things last season, but not enough to, I would have just rather they try another guy at that spot. That's, ooh, excuse me. Sorry about that. That's okay. And again, it's like not an indictment that Frank, like, again, if they tried him and they let him go and they tried someone else this season, like no one's grilling the Mavericks for like the Frank 1-year sign. Like no one's going to be critical of that. It's just, that's what you're supposed to do at the end of the roster. You just keep trying to find those diamonds in the rough, and there's just no reason to hold on to them for more than a year if they don't work out. He didn't work out, and they held on to him 1 year too long. And I assume he won't be back next season, but who knows?
Right. Which then brings us to the first real kind of quasi-rotation player in third-year forward Josh Green. Now, longtime listeners of the show will know that coming into the year, and as recently as last year, I was one of a few Mavs Moneyball members that really didn't think Josh Green had an NBA career ahead of them. He just wasn't, obviously year one, he comes in during COVID year, plays for Rick Carlisle, kind of gets put on the bench early, didn't play summer league, had no experience. Year two, so I think it's heading into Jason Kidd's first year. He doesn't play summer league again for whatever reason.
Because he was the Olympics international.
But he didn't play a minute. He played like 7 total minutes with Australia. So he was back in time, but still didn't play, worked on his game, yada, yada. Had in like some spots in year two, but not enough to like really justify the hope that people were putting into him. And then come into year three, he had a fantastic training camp and really started off the year with a bang and looked very, very good. I'm trying to think how to describe his season after kind of a hot start. Do you want to give it a go?
Yeah, I mean, he just didn't miss shots for like the first 2 months of the season. He had like
that's right.
He had like a 70 true shooting percentage,
like led
by
the
the
league.
end of December. Yeah, like it was crazy. I mean, he was over 60% from the field, over 50% from three by the end of November. It's like, what? Like he played basically a month and a half's worth of games. And I was like, and to go from a guy that never made any shots to I'm making all of my shots was just like crazy. Absolutely crazy. And his defense was always there, at least in terms of effort. So it's clear he put a lot of work into his game, especially around the basket. He was really good around the basket this year, even when his 3-point shot cooled off a little. And when I say cooled off a little, like he still never had a month. His worst month shooting threes was 35%. So the big thing with him is volume. And the two big things, volume, he needs to shoot more. And then consistency. He the Kyrie Luka thing, it was so weird. When those guys were out, he looked like Josh Howard in 2007. And then when Luka and Kyrie came back, he just kind of shrugged back into the shadows, like with these like single point game lines, like playing 21 minutes and scoring 2 points, kind of
refusal to shoot.
Weird. Yeah. And I understand that he had more of a freedom when those guys are out, but the Mavericks coaching staff and him have to figure out a balance. I understand that he's not going to play the way he's going to play when those guys are out. Like, we get it, but there has to be a way to get a little bit more out of him when those guys are on the floor, because he really is one of their few foundational pieces that they can build around Luka going into the future if they decide to keep him on the roster and not trade him.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. I want to say it was Matthew Phillips of Mavs Moneyball, one of our contributors, who pointed this out to me. And I think this is worth considering as Dallas heads into the offseason. The 4 most interesting players on the Mavericks roster moving forward: Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, assuming he resigns, Jaden Hardy going into his second year, Josh Green, eligible for an extension this offseason. 4 guys. All 4 of them, and this includes Josh, are guards. Josh is not a true forward. He's not big enough. That became kind of clear as we watched him. He became a better defender as the year went on for sure. Stopped fouling, stopped getting called for fouls at least. He still had some odd relapses towards the end of the year, but so did everybody. So I don't really want to hold that against him. But he was interesting and good. But he is a guard. He does have ball handling skills. That was really nice to see. But what the Mavericks need is wing depth. And so I'm going to be really curious to see what happens with him and an extension. I think the Mavericks offer him one. I think it'll probably be a deal that leaves social media irritated with the price, but he's not going to get maxed or anything like that. He's probably not going to turn down an extension offer, because for as good of a year as he had, it wasn't as good as everybody remembers. Again, what was his points per game average? I should know this. 9. I should have had this up. Again,
25 minutes per game.
Yeah. And so you can see some projection there, but 75% NBA players score under 10 points a game. The Mavericks need guys that can score the ball a little more, do a little more everything. And Josh just still has too many games where he disappears. That's not to say that'll always happen, but what it does is it makes his future and upside still very nebulous, because for as good as his statistics look, the chart of his games in sort of the growth pattern was very different than Jaden Hardy, who I think showed kind of a upward momentum. Is that fair? Am I missing?
No, Hardy got better. Definitely got better as the season went on.
I thought Green got better, took steps back, got better, took steps back. I mean, Jason Kidd fucked with him a whole lot. That can't be understated, because when the Mavericks signed Justin Holiday, they immediately started him over Green, which was bad. Green, they literally hurt his confidence. You could see it. It was crazy. So
yeah, that was bad. But again, like you said, he could be a building block going forward. They could trade. I mean, he's probably their most valuable trade piece in the non-Luka, non-Kyrie category. Some people might say Hardy after what he did, maybe. But in terms of every team needs a guy like Josh Green, like an athletic perimeter player that can guard and fill in the gaps around, as a glue guy around your stars. But again, he's got to be consistent. He's got to figure out a way to play with Luka and Kyrie where he's just not invisible for 20 to 25 minutes like he showed. He's got to find a happy balance. And then, we'll see. But like you said, again, to me, he is more of a Bullock. If we're looking at the roster, the Mavericks need a Finney-Smith replacement and they need a Bullock replacement, because it's pretty clear that Reggie Bullock is cooked. Green projects to me more as the Bullock replacement, because Bullock's job was to chase around the smaller guards, because that's not what you want Dorian doing.
Right.
Not what he's good at. So they need to, even if they retain Green and they don't trade him for another piece down the road, they still need to find their Dorian replacement. He is not, I see him more as whenever they're ready to move on from Bullock, he's the Bullock replacement, and then they need to find a big wing to replace him.
Well, and I guess depending on how you feel about him coming into the season versus how you is going to affect how you feel about him leaving. So for me, considering I thought he maybe wasn't a professional basketball player, I'm pretty thrilled about the outcome, and I'm delighted that I was wrong with all of my harsh criticism in the past several seasons. If you were hoping for him to become anything like a Desmond Bane, he still just has a long way to go. He had some truly good
Tyrese
games.
Maxey.
Yeah, well, but he had some truly good games this year, like some real building block. It's figuring out some different stuff of how to keep pressing, with if he's going to be that third heat with Luka and Kyrie on the floor, he has to do more with those minutes.
Yeah, he had a stretch to start February, 6 straight games in double digits, shooting really well from three. Like, I mean, there was times where it was like, wow, I mean, they're not even going to miss Dorian because he's going to step into that spot. And then, Luka and Kyrie came back and his production just literally fell off a cliff in a weird way. So yeah, they have to find that balance. It's awesome that he was able to step in during injuries and put up like 20 points, 23 points. Like, again, they need more guys like that because, like, as much as we love Dorian, as much as we love Maxey and some of these other guys that they've been hanging on to for a long time, Reggie, those guys when Luka and Kyrie out were not like, those weren't the kind of guys that could shift their game into, okay, I will step up and I will do more. Like, they kind of maxed out their ceiling where Josh, like, it's kind of nice to know you have a guy on your roster where it's like, okay, Luka's out tonight, he's resting, or he's got a hurt ankle. We know that Josh has the capabilities of being like a 20-point guy, because you just need someone to score points when your stars are out. So, like, Dorian can never do that. Reggie's never going to do that. Maxey's never going to do that. So, even if his development doesn't continue to skyrocket as much as Mavs fans want, just the fact that he has that ability is valuable.
Yep. Okay, well, that's probably all we have. Do you have are any thoughts in your brain rattling around you haven't gotten out?
No. I think we got out my frustration with the stupid tanking narrative at the beginning of the show.
Yeah,
that was the only thing that was really bugging me this week, because like I'm really trying to like detox from Mavericks discussions because like we need a break. I think Ben was saying like from the restart in the bubble till this season ended, we've basically been like painting the town red or whatever you want to call it, like putting our nose to the ground.
Very little breaks.
Yeah, so this is the first legitimate break we've had since the season closed down in March of 2020. So what the fact that these fucking dumb takes are coming out and trying to like catnip, trying to lure me back onto Twitter when I don't want to be there. I'm just like, you assholes, just let me be in peace. Let me be free of this team. I don't want to think about them, too in depth for a little bit. Like, I want to think about the draft. I want to think about that stuff. I don't want to think about.
Well, okay. What non-Mavs stuff are you thinking about? Are you are you getting to watch any television? Yeah. Which I know. So what in the hell are you doing with yourself?
Oh, okay. Non-basketball related. I mean, I'm just like going to bed. You know me, I don't watch a lot of TV. So like, I'm playing games, going to the movies. It's nice. Just like going out on the weekend, like going to have lunch with my mom and my little brother, like when we
touching grass.
Yes. Going outside. Taking my daughter to see the Super Mario Brothers movie.
That movie rocked.
Yeah, we had a great time. She loved it. It was so much fun. So
tight 90 minutes, just the way.
Yes, that was chef's kiss.
Yeah, just the real way it ought to be. If I can make some recommendations to the chat, I'm going to have to put out into the universe that everyone spends part of their off season, if they have the opportunity to watch Apple Plus's Shrinking. It absolutely killed me, made me laugh and even cry a little bit. Great show. I'm looking forward to sinking my teeth into a lot of really bad television. Like still watching a grind. I'm going to berate you into watching Andor over the next 4 months, which will be nice. And I'm finishing up a second pass at Mass Effect. I played Mass Effect 2. Like I beat it every which way I could 10, 12 years ago, whenever it came out. Mass Effect 3, I played once and turned off angry. I played the whole thing, but I remember hating it. And I'm playing it now, and it reminds me of how I felt after watching Lost again, where it was like, oh, this is actually really good. I just didn't understand and was being pissy about the wrong thing, which you tell me I do a lot on entertainment. So that was fun. I just, there's so much stuff I want to play. And I'm like, if I was to ever get like booted from the, like, if we were just decide that we hated the Mavericks, I would play so many backlog video games. I'm also, my little boy's 7 now, and we're going to make a college try at playing Breath of the Wild.
Ooh, wow.
We finally
That's quite the one to jump into.
I know everybody's cool basketball podcast, right, guys? But I hooked it up to the big ass television I have, and I forgot how amazing that game looks. It looks great on the handheld, but like on the big, good God, what a cool looking game.
Yep, for sure.
All right, so before we close out here, just head on over to Mavs Moneyball. We're still writing a lot of stuff. We had our first draft profile up today. One of our new writers wrote about Grady Dick. And I teased him a little bit because he didn't take like a firm enough like stance on Grady Dick, who probably wouldn't. If the Mavericks were in a better spot, he'd be a better player to pick, but they need a guy who can play right now, so it doesn't really seem likely. We're going to be writing more and more. We're going to try to cover like the top 5 guys in the next couple of weeks, just in case. Well, and the likely thing that the Mavericks don't jump in the lottery, we at least want to have words down about what it would be, and then we're going to probably cover a lot. If likely it's 80% chance they stay in the 10th spot, so we'll cover a lot of guys through there, and just sort of see, and then we'll start talking about where the multiverse of options that could happen with the 10th overall pick. And there's a lot of stuff. I mean, Brian Damaris wrote a column last week that he indicated he thinks the Mavericks will trade the pick if they get it, which it makes me irrationally angry, even though I know it. Like, it's not Damaris's fault. Like, it's the most prudent move to get a win now player. But I'm like, oh, this is how we got here.
Yeah. And then what's more, we can look at the players that can be drafted. Like, we don't know who they're going to trade for. Like, there's just, and I'm so bad at projecting that. That's why it's like lame, because it's like, well, I don't know who it's going to be. Like, but I know who they could pick at 10 potentially. But so that's like more fun to get excited about, because with they might trade 10. It's like, well, for who? Like, I can't get excited for just trade.
It becomes so complicated. That was Matt Moore's point when he was talking to us late at night after one of those games, where he's like, you can go into the draft with the intention of trading and nothing would materialize, or you get undercut by someone like the Blazers who have a higher pick doing something similar. So it's just, a lot of people, Locked on Mavs guys talked about Claxton last night. I'm like, does Claxton move the needle? Honestly, does Claxton move the needle? And the fact that I don't have a firm answer for that is just, Jeremy says, just accept that it's Rudy Gobert. I mean, someone sent me like a all hate, like the Mavericks somehow get Draymond Green and get Rudy Gobert. And it's just like an all Kirk hate team is just the ideal situation.
That's where we're headed.
I would have like that's how the Mavericks forced me to get off the airwaves, by just assembling players I hate on the team, specifically me. Okay. Well, guys, once again, thanks for hanging out. I'm going to do a live show either Thursday night or Friday afternoon, if I can steal away from work, depending on how work's going, for 45 minutes or so. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to be, and then actually hit the bell next to the show. Like, there's an option if you click through enough to be able to get notified regardless of, like, every time we go live. That's the best way if you want to join one of these things. We're going to try to post on a regular schedule. We have kind of obligations to do at least 2 a week. We like doing 2 a week. I like doing 2 a week. So, come with your questions, come with your thoughts. Somebody says, wait, I just got here. I'm so sorry. We don't really have anything else to talk about, but I'll be back. And for those of you who are kind of newer to the format, with the shows that I do live show, I bring people up on stage, like here, where you can talk to me like this, because this is low production quality, but great conversation. So hang out with us if you would like, and be ready for that, because I enjoy talking to everybody. And I guess since I already asked Josh if he had anything else, he said no. I'm going to close this out. This has been Kirk Henderson and Josh Bowe. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, rate the podcast, leave reviews, leave comments everywhere you can. I really appreciate everyone's support. We're creeping towards 1,000 subscribers, which, considering we didn't start this till the end of the year, I feel is pretty good. Pretty good. Nothing like our Locked On fan friends who have 23,000 followers. They've been doing it a bit more. All right, guys. Everyone have a great rest of your week, and we will talk soon. Go Mavs.